Chapter 3 The Scientist. Begin all acts and thinking by using Al-Kaloum the All. Tablet 5. The Dogon and the Sirius Mystery. 19 times 22 equals 418. Lo, as mentioned, these extraterrestrials have come to this planet and set up amongst Hummims, as well as humankind. Earth has benevolent and malevolent influences. In Nubia, that is called Ganawa today, in the land referred to as Mali, whose inhabitants moved from the land of Kemet in Kush, you find one such influence. That is the Dogon. Their imams had an astounding knowledge of the star Sirius in the Canis Major constellation, given by extraterrestrials long before they migrated to Mali. While yet living in Tamaray Kemet, called Egypt, where the ritual of the opening of the mouth ceremony is centered around the Sirius star in the Canis Major constellation, they knew that Sirius A, which is the brightest star in the sky, has a satellite called Sirius B, which revolves around it. Sirius B is invisible to the naked eye, and the Dogon Imams had no telescopes, but they knew that it exists, and that its orbit around Sirius A is elliptical, not circular. They knew the position of Sirius A within the orbit, and that the orbit takes 50 years. Sirius B was not discovered in the West by telescope until 1862 AD, and was not photographed until 1970. The ancient Egyptians had an advanced knowledge of astronomy, and they knew about Sirius B, which is why the three Great Pyramids of Giza are lined up perfectly with the Orion star constellation. They made their map face south towards Sirius. The three Pyramids of Giza were originally built by Adafa with the help of extraterrestrial beings. Adafa was in tune with the celestial beings that originally erected the pyramids. They are visitors from other galaxies. One of the Great Pyramids was built to preserve all of his friends' texts during the period of the flood. The Giza pyramids today were constructed by the pharaoh Khufu, also known as Cheops, and his son Khafre and Menkaure. Khufu reigned for 23 years and had many sons and daughters. He sponsored several building projects, and monuments bearing his name can be seen all over Egypt. Khufu also sent mining expeditions to Sinai, Nubia, and the Arabian desert for their mineral wealth. In later times, Khufu's name was engraved on scarabs. The most famous of these are related to the Westgar papyrus. Khufu was an able and energetic ruler, during whose reign the land flourished and the art reached perfection. Khufu left the land in such a stable economic position as to enable his son Khafre to reconstruct the second pyramid, a monument almost as colossal as that of his father. Khufu was responsible for only one accomplishment of magnitude, yet the size of this one is so gigantic that it overshadows all of his father's military and trading exploits, and has brought Khufu's name and fame down undiminished through thousands of years. So much has been written about the Great Pyramid of Giza. Not only is it the largest monument of its kind, but it is the result of excellent workmanship and accurate planning and proportionate beauty. The Great Pyramid has four major internal features: the underground chamber, the Queen's Chamber, the Grand Gallery, and the King's Chamber. The King's Chamber is made from Aswan granite. There is an entrance to a 2x18 shaft north from the King's Chamber, and the southern shaft both extends through from the outer casing of the pyramid. And there's a northern shaft from the Queen's Chamber which does not reach the outer casing. It's closed at both ends. The pyramid form has a certain austere beauty, and the tawny gold of the stone is capable of bewitching, and there's subtle variations in the colour as the sunlight changes. The complex of the Great Pyramid has a valley temple that is, even today, almost completely untouched. Built of limestone, the work and skill almost equals that of the Great Pyramid itself. It is adorned with statues, sculptures and reliefs. The Great Pyramid itself stands 137 meters high at present. Originally, it stood 146.59 meters. Including the casing, the Great Pyramid is estimated to consist of 2,600,000 stone blocks, averaging 2.5 tons each. Some even weigh as much as 15 tons. The weight of the pyramid is so great that it had to be built with relieving chambers, designed to take the weights of the pyramid's upper portions off. The greatest thing about the Great Pyramid is it is the first and last of its kind. No other pyramid before or after it has matched it in size, beauty, nor magnificence. The shafts originally pointed at something in the heavens. The position of the stars today is not the same as in the time of the ancient Egyptians, due to precession. Due to precession, the angle of the southern shaft of the King's Chamber is 45 degrees. The shaft lined up perfectly with Orion's belt. There was one Egyptian statue that stood erect, and there's only one constellation of an erect man, and that is the Orion constellation. The identity between the deceased pharaoh and the deity Osiris made Orion immediately a candidate. For the shaft's purpose was to enable the soul of the pharaoh to communicate between the earth and the sky. The shaft in the Maluka's chamber pointed to Sirius, a star in the Canis Major constellation. Rededef, Khufu's immediate successor, built his pyramid at Abu Warash, about 5 miles north of his father's pyramid at Giza. Because he did not agree with the way his father ran his kingdom, he chose this distant lonely site, high on a lofty spur of the plateau. Another son of Khufu, Khafre, succeeded Rededef, who reigned for only 8 years. He reconstructed the second pyramid at Giza, which has the most preserved complex of the Giza field. Its valley temple is so close to the Sphinx that it was at one time known as the Temple of the Sphinx. The valley temple is built around a core of massive stone blocks of local limestone, covered with finely polished red granite. Alabaster was used for the floor of the building, as well as the walls of some of the smaller rooms. Flanking the mortuary temple are 5 rock-cut boat pits. Most of the casing has worn away, but that which remains retains such a high polish that it reflects the moon at shadow hours. It attained a height of 43.5 meters with a slope of 53% 10 inches. Khafre's son and successor was Menkura, also known as Menka. The third pyramid at Giza, though smaller, was set off by a granite casing covering the lower 16 courses. However, before the casing of the pyramid could be completed, Menka died, and his successor, Shepseskaf, finished the monuments. He built the complex of mud brick and didn't bother to build a large pyramid for himself. One of the splendid burial chambers is built with red granite walls and roof. The vaulted ceiling was made by first erecting the pointed roof and then hollowing out the slabs to make them concave. In this room was the king's beautiful basalt sarcophagus. It had the typical palace facade paneling and was no doubt contemporary with the pyramid. The real splendor of the complex of the third pyramid is the mortuary temple. The core masonry is of huge blocks of local limestone, which were originally lined with granite on the outside. The western side of the court originally had red granite pillars. On this end was the sanctuary, or the offering shrine, built against the face of the pyramid. It was paved with red granite. One of the corridors in the northern end of the temple has walls of black granite. The parent pyramid stood at a height of 66.5 meters, the base being 108.5 meters square at a slope of 51%. Shepseskaf, the last of the pharaohs after Menka, completed his father's tomb. Once again, the trend for building tombs changed. Choosing a site between Zoser's step pyramid and the pyramids of Snefru, the father of Khufu, Shepseskaf's tomb differed completely from any monument preceding it. It is neither a mastaba nor a pyramid. It stands 100 by 72 meters and stands 18 meters high. It is merely called a sarcophagus. All of these pyramids align perfectly with the 3 stars of the Orion constellation, which is directly above Sirius. The shaft in the Queen's Chamber pointed to Sirius. The position of these pyramids and their relation to the Nile is the same as the 3 stars of Orion's belt in relation to the Milky Way. The constellation of the Great Dog lies just below Orion and a little to the left of it. Canis Major is also known as the Dog of Orion, and its constellation pictogram fairly represents a dog. With Sirius, the brightest star in the heavens, on the dog collar, it should be easy to find. The brightest stars are of 0 magnitude, and as the magnitude of the number increases, the star gets fainter. Thus a star of magnitude which is 4 is less than a star of the second magnitude. First magnitude stars are very bright. Sirius is also called the dog star. Yet another of its names is the Nile star, and it refers to the time 5,000 years ago when the ancient Egyptians worshipped it, as recorded in the 114 scrolls of Ahmed. In the 53rd degree, the 49th verse, it reads, "And surely he, Yahweh, is the Rab of Al-Shara, Sirius." This is the very star that you Arabs worshipped. Each year when the dog star rose just before the hot morning sun and was visible for a little while at dawn, the Imams knew that the Nile would soon overflow and that they would see the Milky Way arching across the sky. This they knew was the celestial Nile. The Nile would overflow and spread the life-giving water on the waiting crops which had been planted on the riverbanks. The flooding of the Nile coincided with the reappearance of Orion. The deity Usa, whom the Greeks called Osiris, represented Orion, and to the left of him was the star Sirius, which represented Aset, also called Isis, and together they would light the skies by shadow hour. Giant temples were built for them, with their corridors orientated towards the point where the dog star would rise, as with the golden city of Wanahi or Kodesh, which is built to them in this day and time in the Egypt to the west. So this was the ancient Egyptian name for Sirius, as it was spelt by the Greeks. Sirius was the most important star in the sky to the ancient Egyptians. The Egyptians had a Sothic calendar, and the ancient Egyptian calendar year consisting of 365 and 1/4 days, a cycle consisting of 1460 years or 365 days in the ancient Egyptian calendar, and the first appearance of Sirius on the eastern horizon just before the sun. After 70 days in the Duat, the Egyptian name for the underworld was what is called the helical rising of Sirius, which is seen as Sirius and the sun joined together at the moment. This event occurred once a year and gave rise to the Sothic calendar, the ancient Egyptian calendar year consisting of 365 and 1/4 days. The helical rising of Sirius was so important to the ancient Egyptians that their gigantic temples were constructed with their main aisles passageways orientated precisely towards the spot on the horizon where Sirius would appear on the expected daylight hours, as with us Nuwarpian Moors today. The light of Sirius would be channeled along the corridor to flood the altar in the inner sanctum, as if a pinpointed spotlight had been switched on. One such temple to the star Sirius was the temple of Aset at Dendora. Usir, as the husband of Aset, was identified with the constellation Orion. Nephis, the sister of Aset, represented Sirius B, the dark companion star that is described as a circle around Sirius. Anupu, whom the Greeks called Anubis, the son of Nephis and Usa, represented Sirius C. The Egyptians wanted to build a heaven on earth, thy kingdom come on earth as it is in Orion heaven, and we have done the same. When a pharaoh died, he was mummified, then encased in an outer shell, like what was done by Aset, who is also called Isis by the Greeks, to the deceased body of Usir, who is called by the Greeks Osiris. One of the great ascension rituals is the opening of the mouth ceremony. When a pharaoh died, his consort and still mortal son must cause new life to stir in him. At the exact moment of the early rising of Orion, the pharaoh must be reborn as an Alahum. You are taught that the word pharaoh means great house, from the Latin word phara, from the Greek pharaoh, from the Hebrew paro, from the Egyptian par-o, par meaning house and o meaning great. However, this word comes from the word pharaoh, which comes from the root word phar. The word pharaoh comes from the Latin pharos, from the Greek pharos, meaning lighthouse. Pharos is a former island in the Bay of Alexandria, Egypt, famous in ancient times for its lighthouse. The Metaphysical Bible Dictionary defines Pharaoh as the sun. Pharaoh's being in Egypt shows us that the light of the Sun of Righteousness is veiled by our life on the lower or sense plane. So, the word Pharaoh does not mean great house, it means lighthouse. The son and the wife performs this ceremony with an az. The pharaoh is standing upright. The son takes the az or adze, which is shaped by the northern constellation, and strikes open the mouth of the pharaoh, and takes another tool and plunges the ear, and the mouth is open. The air goes in, and the pharaoh is alive again. He is reborn for the sky. Rebirth and new life were very important to the Egyptians, and they were also required to have sexual potency to recopulate with the deities. Each had many wives and hundreds of children from the breeding of gods on earth. The next thing that would have happened is they would have turned the mummy to the south in alignment with the southern shaft and attached an erect phallus to his mummified body, and his duty before departing into the afterworld was to seed the womb, symbolic of the womb of Aset and the birth of Horus. Those that don't know say that the Dogons got their information on Sirius from the Egyptians. However, according to the Dogon, they got their knowledge from travelers from beyond the stars, who traveled from the planet attached to Sirius B and who landed on the Earth and bred with them. As a matter of fact, the Dogons were the descendants from the Egyptians. These travelers from beyond the stars that came and bred with the Dogons were reptilians. These reptilians came from Sirius B. They traveled to Earth once their sun or star Sirius B collapsed, becoming very dense, also known as a white dwarf. When the planet-sized ship called Procyon, a binary star in the constellation Canis Minor, which is the Greek name for Nibiru, meaning planet which crosses the skies or planet of the crossing passed by Sirius B, its presence drained the energy from the sun and it caused this great star Sirius B to collapse. Sirius B had two planets. The Narians Greys were on one planet and the Nomos Reptilian were on the other. Both planets rotated around Sirius B. So when their sun died, they, the inhabitants of Sirius, followed Nibiru through the Milky Way, one chasing the other. They took residence on Earth in a country now called Mali, which is where the Dogon lived. The reptilians have been breeding and living with humans for centuries. They are humanoid in shape and reptilian in heritage. Their leaders are the Draconi. They are from Draco, a constellation in the polar region of the northern hemisphere, near Cephus and Ursa Major, also called the Dragon. The reptilians stand from 8 foot down to 6 foot in height, with dark green scaly skin. Their leader is Harton. Harton is a reptilian who defected from the reptilians while on Earth and reformed to fight against the reptilians on behalf of humans. He is the commander of the Ashtar Command. There are 16 kinds of reptilians seen these days by abductees. There is a type of species of reptilians called the gargoyles that have special wings, which are flaps of skin supported by long ribs of the Dracona. Some reptilians can either lay eggs or bear by larvae, and some of them are of neutral gender and reproduce like lizards. The male species nurtures the eggs and the females just lay them. These beings are also known as the dragon race or the whip-tailed lizards, and the symbology usually includes a winged serpent. There are elements of their species which do not have wings, the soldier class and the scientists. The Narians and the Maccabians are really a crossbreed between humans, greys and the reptilian species. There are several other lines of crossbreeds between humans and reptilian species that have specific characteristics, such as the Ramadians, who are being used as slaves by the reptilians. They are under close surveillance by the reptilians, who have them in such a state that they depend totally upon the reptilians for their reproduction and food absorption. The same way the Negroid in the world are slowly but surely becoming dependent upon the Caucasus. As you can see, the European and his Euro-Arab and Euro-Asian and Euro-American have made it part of their way of life to invade foreign countries, trample their ways and customs and traditions, take control of people's minds and lives, enslave people, manipulate people, and even use them against their own people. Then their tactics is religion or other powerful organizations. This is the same tactic that was used against the Ramadians and even other reptilians. The beings from Andromeda, who work alongside with the reptilians, also came and captured the Ramadians and started breeding their own race of greys, which in turn led to a breed of mean, vicious, bug-eyed beings called the Maccabians. The Ramadians were once used by the Anunnaki and are highly intelligent. However, they began to die off. There are 70 different species of greys. Only 8 of them are still coming to this planet. There are 3 major kinds of greys. The Maccabians from Zeta Reticula are the ones who are about 4 to 5 foot tall, a mixture of greys and reptilians, and those from Bellatrix, also a star in the Orion constellation, that are about 3 to 5 foot tall, and another species of Orion grey that ranges in height from 6 to 9 foot tall. The reptilian beings didn't have the Dogon's best interest, they just used them. They lived in water, and during the shadow hours they came on land to teach and mix with the Dogon. The Nubians or Dogon referred to them as Dogir, or the plural Dogri, meaning ugly water beings. The Dogon speak and teach of what they have been taught by the Dogri today. They have knowledge about the universe, star formations, and the constellations without the aid of telescopes. The maps that these Dogons have are so accurate that they match modern maps of today. If you look up at the sky, the brightest star you can see is Sirius. Venus, which is originally called Lahamu, and Jupiter, which is originally called Kishar, are often brighter, but they are not stars, they're planets, which rotate around our own sun, which is a star itself. No astronomer will tell you there is any particular reason for intelligent life to be in the area of Sirius. The reason Sirius is so bright is because it's large and close, and bigger than the Sun, and bigger than a handful of other nearby stars. About the middle of the last century, an astronomer was looking rather hard at Sirius over a period of time, and got annoyed because it wasn't sitting still, it was wobbling. He had a difficult time figuring this out, but he finally concluded that an extremely heavy and massive star that was going around Sirius could make it wobble that way. The only trouble was that there wasn't any large star going around Sirius. Instead, there turned out to be a very tiny thing going around it every 50 years. And so Sirius became to be called Sirius A, and the little thing became Sirius B. Sirius B was at the time unique in the universe as far as anyone knew. Over 100 of these things have now been actually seen scattered around the sky, and there are many thousands more which we cannot see, even through modern telescopes, because they are so tiny and their light is so feeble. They are called white dwarfs. White dwarfs are small white stars with a large amount of material packed into an extremely small space. White dwarfs are strange, because although they are feeble, they are strong. They do not give out much light, but they are powerful gravitationally. On a white dwarf, we would not even be a fraction of an inch high. We would be flat, pulled in by the gravity. The star that was necessary to make Sirius A wobble was a little thing, but it still had to be as massive and heavy as an ordinary star, but of much more enormous size. It is, in short, a star so dense and closely packed that it is not even made out of regular matter. It is made out of what is called degenerate matter, or super dense matter, where the atoms are pressed together and the electrons squashed. This matter is so heavy that it cannot be thought of in any familiar terms. The Dogons believe that the most important star in the sky is Sirius B, which cannot be seen. They call this tiny star Bo Tolo, Tolo meaning star, and Bo or Po is a cereal grain, commonly called fonio in West Africa. To the Dogon, this tiny grain represents the tiny star, and the star is called Po after the grain. The Dogons also say that Sirius B rotates on its axis, as well as its movement in space. Digitaria, which is another name for Sirius B, also revolves upon itself over a period of 1 year, and its revolution is honoured during the celebration of the Bado rite, which occurs every 60 years called the Sagai, which happens when Sirius B completes its rotation around Sirius A and rotates on its own axis around itself. This is something that all stars do. On April the 23rd, 1994 AD, the stars Sirius A and B crisscrossed in front of each other, which happens every 9,000 years. Energies were shot down to the planet Earth to rejuvenate the Dogon. Sirius B is composed of a special kind of material, which is called a sagala, from the root word meaning strong, and this material doesn't exist on Earth. The material is heavier than all the iron on Earth. Sirius B is made of a super dense matter of a kind which exists nowhere on Earth. All this forms the most sacred and most secret tradition known to the Dogon, the basis of their religion and of their lives. The Dogons also say that there is a third star in the Sirius system, which they call the Emir star, which they compare to the Digitaria. They say that it is 4 times as light in weight and travels along a greater trajectory in the same direction. They say that the Emir itself is the sun of women, a little sun. The Dogon have knowledge that the planets revolve around the sun. Planets are called Tolotenes, meaning stars that turn around something. The Dogons refer to our solar system as Ogo's placenta, whereas the system of the star Sirius and its companion star and satellites is referred to as the Nomos placenta. Nommo is the collective name for the great culture and founder of the civilization who came from the Sirius system to set up society on Earth. The Dogon have recorded this information given by the Nomos long ago. Nommo is an individual and Nomos is the plural. The Nomos were amphibious creatures known as reptilians. The name Nomos means the masters of the water, also called instructor or monitors. The Nomos have to live in the water. The Nomos' seat is in the water. The landing of Nommo on our Earth is called the Day of the Fish, and the planet he came from in the Sirius system, which is known as the pure Earth of the Day of the Fish. The Nomos landed in an ark. The ark landed on the Earth to the northeast of Dogon country, which is the direction of Egypt in the Middle East, where the Dogon claim to have come from originally before going to the Mende. The Dogon described the landing of the ark as the word of Nommo, which was cast down by him in the 4 directions as he descended, and it sounded like the echoing of 4 large stone blocks being struck with stones by the children. It was a thundering vibration sound. The ark landed on the fox's dry land and displaced a pile of dust raised by the whirlwind it caused. The violence of the impact roughened the ground as it skidded. The Nommo is said to be the monitor for the universe, the father of mankind, guardian of its spiritual principles, dispenser of rain and master of the water. Not all the Nomos came to Earth. The one called Nommo Dai, or the great Nommo, remained in the skies or heavens with Amma. He is their vicar. He manifests himself in the rainbow, which is called the path of the Nommo. He is the guardian of the spiritual principles of the living creatures on Earth. There are 3 other distinct kinds of Nommo, each personified as an individual. There is the Nommo Titiane, messenger or deputy of the Nommo Dai, and he executes the latter's great works. The Nommo who came to Earth in a spaceship are of this class. A 3rd class of Nommo are the Nomos represented by the O-Nommo, Nommo of the pond. He will be sacrificed for the purification and reorganization of the universe. He will come in human form and descend on the earth in an ark with the ancestors of men. Then he will take on his original form to rule over the waters and give birth to many descendants. The 4th Nommo is the naughty disruptor named Ogo, or Nommo Anagono. He was about to be finished being created, but he rebelled against his creator and introduced disorder into the universe. Eventually he will become the pale fox, which is the image of his fall. In many ways, the fox resembles the Egyptian deity Set. The Dogons believe that the original germ of life is symbolized by the smallest cultivated seed, Digitaria exilis, commonly known as Fonyo, meaning little. This seed, quickened by an internal vibration, bursts the enveloping sheath or skin and emerges to reach the uttermost confines of the universe. At the same time, this is unfolding matter, which moves along a path which forms a spiral or helix. Just as on the vegetal plane, which is the plane of growth, 7 seeds came out of the Digitaria exilis first, so in the same way as it's done on the astral plane. From the first star came 7 others bearing the same names of the 7 corresponding seed. The preceding events took place inside an enormous egg, a Dunotal, a world situated in infinite space and containing the appointed model of the creation, Nommo, the son of Amma. This egg was divided into 2 twin placenta, each of which should have contained a pair of twin Nommo. In one placenta, however, the male person did not await the usual period of gestation appointed by Amma, but emerged prematurely from the egg. Moreover, he tore a fragment from his placenta, and when it came down through space, outside the egg, this fragment became the Earth. This being Urugu brought the Fonyo with him, intending to make a world of his own. This irregular procedure at the outset disorganized Amma's order of creation. From this imperfection arose the notion of impurity. Earth and Urugu were, from the beginning, solitary and impure. Urugu, realizing that this situation would effectively prevent him from carrying on Earth, he returned to heaven to try and find the rest of his placenta with his twin soul. But at his revolt, Amma had handed over his twin soul Nukida to the remaining pair in the other part of the egg, and he had put her in their charge. Urugu could not retrieve Nukida. From that time on, he has been engaged in a perpetual and fruitless search for her. He returned to the dry earth, where now there began in darkness to come into existence single incomplete beings, offsprings of incest. In fact, he procreated his own placenta in the earth, that is, with his mother. Seeing this, Amma decided to send to Earth the Nommo of the other half of the egg. They came down to Earth on a gigantic ark, at the center of which stood the two Nommo of the sky, who had assumed the guise of human blacksmiths. At the 4 cardinal points were the 4 other pairs of Nommo, avatars of the first and the ancestors of man. The 4 male ancestors were named Amaseru, Lebiseru, Binuseru, and Dionguseru. Every 60 years the Dogon hold a ceremony called the Sagai ceremony. Its purpose is the rejuvenation of the world. When it is time for the Sagai, the elders in the Tanatono shelter at Yugo draw a symbol on the rock with red ochre, which is any of the several earthly mineral oxides of iron occurring in yellow, brown or red, and it's used as pigments, which represents the Kanaga mask. This in turn represents the deity Amma. A hole is made in the ground below it, symbolizing the Sagai, and thus Amma in the egg of the world. The hole is also interpreted as the hole which must be dug to put seeds in. From this viewpoint, the holes are arranged in a series of 3, connotating 3 Sagais, placed beneath the sign of 3 seeds, after which they are named. Thus, the Sagai at the beginning of this century was called Emi Sagai, the sorghum Sagai. The next one will be called Yu Sigi, the millet Sagai, and the one after that Nu Sigi, the haricot Sagai. There is another figure painted on the facade of the sanctuaries, which reveals rather more specific data. It is called Sigilugu, meaning calculation of the Sagai, and consists of a line of vertical chevrons, which is a badge of rule, the notches of which are painted alternately black, red and white, which are the secret colors. Each color corresponds to a seed, the first to millet, the plant or grass, the second to haricot, the pond or seed, and the third to sorghum, the grain. The Dogon act as understudies for other more complex practices, and the knowledge to do with the Sirius system. The Dogon names for this star is Sigitolo, meaning the star of the Sagai, or Yasigitolo, star of the Yasagai, and indicates its relation with the ceremony of the renovation of the world, which takes place every 60 years, from where you get your 60 seconds in a minute and 60 minutes in an hour. Sirius, however, is not the basis of the system. It is one of the foci or focus of the orbit of a tiny star called Digitaria, Botolo, or the star of the Uruguru, also called Urugutolo. The orbit described by Digitaria around Sirius is perpendicular to the horizon, and its position is alluded to in one of the most common ceremonies. When Digitaria is close to Sirius, the latter becomes brighter. When it's at its most distant from Sirius, Digitaria gives off a twinkling effect, suggesting several stars to the observer. This trajectory symbolizes excision and circumcision, an operation which is represented by the closest and furthest passage of Digitaria to Sirius. The left part of the oval is the foreskin or clitoris, and the right part is the knife. A horizontal figure rests on a vertical axis, which connects 2 circles, Sirius and Digitaria. The center of the figure is a circle T, which represents the trajectory of Digitaria. The line E is the penis, the hook B is the foreskin. There are 2 horns hinged on the circle, and reproduce once again the 2 parts of the trajectory, the knife and the foreskin. Thus, the Sirius system is associated with the practices of renovating people. The period of the orbit is counted double, that is, 100 years, because the Sagais are covened in pairs of twins, so as to insist on the basic principle of twinness. It is for this reason that the trajectory is called Munyu, from the root word monye, to reunite. Digitaria is represented in Wazuba either by a dot or by a sack surrounding a concentric circle of 10 dots, which are the 8 ancestral nomos and the initial couple of nomo. During the Bado ceremony, the oldest woman of the family draws, at the entrance of the house, the pattern of Nyan Aduno Tonu, meaning world of women, or the pattern of the Aduna Dale Donal Tono, meaning top and bottom of the world. The Kanaga sign is similar to the symbol that represents the Pisces sign. This constellation was named Gemini Pisces by the Romans because there are 2 fish. The western fish heads northwards towards Andromeda, a constellation in the northern hemisphere between Lacerta and Perseus and the south of Cassiopeia, and the eastern fish back in the direction of Aquarius, a constellation in the equatorial region of the southern hemisphere near Pisces and Aquila, also called Waterbearer. When the energy field on Risk was starting to increase and the whole was starting to lose its color, the Riskians had to abort their planet and go to Orion. They had to get closer to the Milky Way, so they moved to Lathmu, called Mars, where they set up a commune of laboratories. They also went to Mashig, today called Pluto. The beings of Zeta Reticuli who lived in Orion didn't want the Riskians to live there because they were taking over. They objected to the power structure made by the Riskians. However, they didn't bother them because of the Denier. The Riskians aborted Mars and went to the planet Earth because of better living conditions. Some went to Aldebaran, a double star in the constellation Taurus, 68 light-years from Earth, and one of the brightest stars in the sky. Arcturus, the fourth brightest star in the sky, and the brightest star in the constellation Bootes, approximately 36 light-years from Earth and Pleiades, an open star cluster in the constellation Taurus, consisting of several hundred stars, of which 6 are visible to the naked eye. However, they were at war with beings from Andromeda Rigel, a bright double star in the constellation Orion, and Aldebaran, and they took control of these star systems from the Riskians and all their technology. These beings from Andromeda Rigel and Aldebaran attacked and defeated the Riskians that were there because they were not warriors. They were colonizing to prepare a place for the beings from Ilion until their star system could be mended. Both of these star systems were there long before the Nordic Aryan beings came there. These Aryan beings called themselves Pleiadians, deceptive as they are. They, to this date, are influencing the minds of humans. Their link on Earth in latter time was to the Third Reich, under a demon referred to as Adolf Hitler, who was influenced by the 80th of the 200 fallen beings, whose name being Hitler, a disagreeable being who seeks to rule the planet by defected albino leprous beings. A woman named Madame Blavatsky, who was born under the name Helena Petrovna von Hahn, branched off and headed the Theosophical Society. She was a well-known witch. 2 witches who were also psychics named Maria Ostich and Zigram. The Thor Society and Madame Blavatsky came together and selected Adolf Hitler in the year 1930 AD to be their contactee, or a man on this planet Earth. They were contacted by the beings called the Ashtar Command from the Pleiades and the Aldebaran constellations. The Ashtar Command are among the many entities that come to Earth and have been circling above the Earth, for the most part invisible to the naked eye, since the early 50s of the Gregorian calendar. They, the Ashtar Command, were humanoid and have less water in their bodies and are pasty in appearance. In the year 1952 AD of the Gregorian calendar, crafts were logged as being seen over the White House in Washington, D.C., USA. There was a meeting held, and the Ashtar Command met with the late President Dwight Eisenhower, at which time America was asked to lay down their arms. However, beings from the planet Venus, Commander Valiant Thor, also known as Val Thor, and his crew members Don, Tanya and Jill were present at the meeting also, and said don't trust the people from Aldebaran. These beings from Aldebaran became highly insulted after they were labelled untrustworthy. They went back in time and had a meeting of psychics with the Fool Society that led to what is called the Third Reich, whose power still rules the world today. Hitler held his super race with great reverence and respect. These beings have light blonde hair and blue eyes. They are originally bred by gene transplants, or what is called embryo implantation. The beings from Aldebaran gave Hitler a lot of technology and flying saucers, which Hitler took out to the Antarctica, a continent lying chiefly within the Antarctic Circle and asymmetrically centered on the South Pole. They were responsible for the technology and plans for a super race. Hitler was actually breeding a superior race for extraterrestrials. This group from Aldebaran is also responsible for your neutrinoid race. They forged visitations to hide their links from Billy Meyer of Switzerland to the Third Reich and Zionist ties under a Zionist named Claude Vorelhorn. Born in Vichy, France, on September the 30th in the year 1946 AD, who calls himself Ra'el. A good eye sees it simply lacking the is for ISIS, which would make it Israel. Israel, where this individual Claude Vorelhorn, who calls himself David, the name of the real Messiah, set his embassy in the state of Israel. Make note that when the prophecies of the Messiah is recorded in Psalms 89:20 and Jeremiah 39, in both cases the Aramaic word Dawid means beloved, which stems from the root word Dud. In the Ashuric you find Dawud, also meaning beloved, which comes from the root word Wadad. Again, in Deception, Claude calls himself David to imply he is the Savior. He is linked to Claude Doggins, born in Sulphur Springs, Oklahoma, of the Brotherhood of the White Temple, who calls himself the Real. Again, you see the name Dar-El. The Real's teachings was identified as the wisdom of the ancients, resembling those of other theosophically derived wisdom schools and organizations. The name, the Brotherhood of the White Temple, was used prior to Duriel by Annie Besant, who was successor to Madame Blavatsky. Duriel says he had previously visited colonies inside of Mount Shasta, but the visits were astral, not physical. In 1931 AD, he was invited to visit the Atlantean colony in the flesh. He was lecturing in Los Angeles when two of the audience members identified themselves as colonists. They invited him to visit their colony at Mount Shasta that day. He was taken down into the caverns beneath the earth. Doriel says he had a personal contact with the Sumunine, Deros. The symbol of Doriel's organization is the six-pointed star and a swastika, the movement being called the Raelian movement under a French Jew. The symbol has taken many forms, having the same root in deception of the Aryan race, and it can be found today as the Ku Klux Klan or the White Brotherhood, breeding groups such as the Aryan Nation, the skinheads, the white supremacists, which will eventually turn on the government. The Aryan race, as they call themselves, whose image they worship as being blonde-haired and blue-eyed, pale-skinned superiors, who Ra'el claims that the original fathers, who he calls Elohims, which is of course Jewish or a Hebrew word for gods, came from very far away. Later, it simply became Pleiades. This is a grand deception by the beings of Andromeda, an insect-type being who the late President Dwight Eisenhower could not stomach. They are the High Council and advisors to the cloned Aryan Pleiadians, who yielded an alphabet that begins with Aleph, Bay, Keth and Daleth, which is simply a form of Yiddish used by modern Jews, and they call it Hebron. As you can see, it originally came from a form of Kabbalistic script, saying that their planet in Pleiades is Error, a phonetic that is self-explanatory from error, and Hebron from Hebrew. The deception by these German Jews, whose god is Hitler, called Adolf Hitler, is in place, and is spreading amongst the disagreeable Nordics of the planet. This is in hopes to find a place in the universe amongst the star people where they are not welcome. All races on this planet have had extraterrestrial involvement, from the Sumerians to the Aztecs, the Hopi to the Aborigine, to the Egyptians and the Nubian Hebrews, Christians and Muslims, in the form of prophets or angels as they say. However, none have come to the cursed seed of Canaan. To the Aryan there has been none. So they create there such as Nostradamus, Edgar Cayce and Jean Dixon, who have all been proven to be incorrect in their prophecies, but they will seek to kill any Negroid who appears to have the ability to lead. They are known to be killers of the Negroid prophets and leaders, so they choose to distort the history of the Dogon. They seek to fit themselves in a history far greater than theirs, so they say they are from Pleiades. And there are some of them who claim to be direct descendants of extraterrestrials or direct descendants of prophets, such as Claude Vorelhorn, who calls himself Ra'el. He claims that he is the last messenger of the Elohim and the last prophet, the shepherd of shepherds. And remember, Yeshua said, "See that you not be deceived, for many shall come in my name," as recorded in the book of Yohana, John, the 10th degree, the 11th verse. I am the good shepherd giveth life for his sheep. And the 14th verse, I am the good shepherd, and I know my sheep, and I am known of mine. They, The blonde-haired, blue-eyed Nordic race claim that they are the descendants of Pleiadians, humanoids with reptilians living within them, who claim to come in peace, yet plan to rule. These Pleiadians say they come from the planet Era in the Pleiades constellation. Their invasion and eventual takeover they describe as V, for the V-shape of Taurus. Pleiades is a star cluster 490 rounded off to the nearest, which makes it approximately 500 light years away from Earth, that's located in the Taurus constellation. Taurus the Bull is one of 12 constellations of the zodiac. Pleiades are a famous part of Taurus. The V-shaped head of Taurus is usually referred to as Hades, a relatively nearby cluster, which is another way of saying Hades, meaning the underworld or hell. This shows you that these Nordics claiming Pleiades are actually saying that they come from hell. The symbol for Taurus is a bull. The Greek symbol for Taurus is Tau. The Tau is one of the most ancient symbols. It symbolizes resurrection. The symbol is a circle above a horizontal line, connected with a vertical line. The horizontal line symbolizes the earth. The circle symbolizes the rising of the sun, and the vertical line symbolizes their descent to the planet Earth, as springing into life. In ancient writings of Mu, it is symbolized as the immersion of land. The Tau is a picture of the constellation of the Southern Cross. The reason for its adoption as the symbol of resurrection was that when the Southern Cross appeared in a certain angle in the heavens over Mu, it brought the long-looked-for rain. With the rain, seeds in the ground sprang to life. Dropping foliage revived, and it sent forth fresh shoots, upon which were the flowers and fruit. Then it became a time of plenty and rejoicing in Mu. New life had been resurrected. The Tau cross was a symbol of Saint Anthony. The cross comes from the Greek letter Tau, which was adapted from the Aramaic Hebrew letter Tor, the 23rd letter, the 400th abjad meaning cross. The Tau literally meant sign or mark. The Tau was the cross in the form of a T, and it was used to be branded on the thighs and necks of horses and camels. The T is the symbol of Tammuz, the son of Nimrod and Samaras, not to be mistaken with Tammuz, son of Ishtar and Dumuzi. The Ankh has also been associated with the crux ansata of the Coptic Church. This was a cross in the form of a T, which represented the Greek Tau, and an O, which represented the Greek letter Omega, meaning last, doomed or dead. Thus, this symbol represented the mark of death. The death is the deception and betrayal and murder of Osiris Usir by his brother Set, symbolic of Satan. Thus, you have Cypher with Lucifer, giving you Lucifer, the bright morning star, another name given to Jesus. I am the bright morning star, son of Usir, who is Osiris, symbolic of the rising sun, the early morning star, which is also the symbol of the cross. The Romans used the cross as a punishment of crucifixion. The symbol originated from the Egyptian ring symbol. The ring represents eternity. It is worn to provide protection against illness, and it was an amulet for good health. It also represents the great year and the divine court of Usir. The Egyptians had several amulets or talismans that were used for different purposes, such as the jet, a conventional representation of the genital organs of Aset, and the tet, a portion of the backbone of Usir, the heart, with the portrait head of the owner of the amulet. The heart's commonest form is two plumes resting on a pair of horns of the kudu and a special crown, the two plumes of Amen, later the Atef crown, the papyrus scepter, the eye and the eyebrow of Horus, specially symbolic of strength, the pillow or heart rest, which was used by the living and was placed under the necks of mummies, the quadruple eye of Ra in the four quarters of the world, the Ujet or eye of Ra, the Ujet or eye of Ar, the moon deity, the seeing, the seer, names of the moon deity Allah. The Tau is a very prominent symbol in the ancient writings of the Hindus, Chinese, Chaldeans, Incas, Quechas, Egyptians and other ancient peoples. In one of the Kabbalistic Masonic legends, Hiram Abiff is given a hammer in the form of a Tau by his ancestor Tubal-Cain. The Tau cross is preserved to modern masonry under the symbol of the T-square, the gavel. The Tau cross, which was inscribed on the forehead of every person admitted into the mysteries of Mithras, the ancient Persian god of light and the guardian against evil, often identified with the sun. When a ruler was initiated into the Egyptian mysteries, the towel was placed against his lips. Be not deceived, my children, for there is a massive deception going on with the Zionists who are trying to tie the extraterrestrial involvement in with them, claiming to be the children of light, our ancestors. Don't let those demons fool you into thinking that they are here to help you and guide you back to the right path. Remember, these are the same ones that betrayed our ancestors, the woolly-haired dark-skinned Riskians. The Riskians trusted the Pleiadians, only to be betrayed. The ones that attacked the Riskians were hybrid humanoids made by the reptilians. They were dipping into the genes of evolutionary man on Earth. They are various crossbreeds, and some are amphibians. The beings from Andromeda who work alongside with the reptilians also came and attacked them, and took control of the Ramadians and started breeding them. Alriska the Knot is not a bright star, but connects the pair, which together form a large L shape, cradling the square of Pegasus. The Sun enters Pisces on March the 13th and remains there until April the 19th. During this time, it crosses the equator from the southern to the northern celestial hemisphere on about March the 22nd. That point in time is regarded as the beginning of spring, the vernal equinox in the northern part of the globe. The equinox is also the particular place where the Sun actually crosses the celestial equator in its diagonal climb. It may be remembered that this point marks the 0-hour position in right ascension, from which the 24 hours in right ascension are counted. This is why the coordinates at the point of the vernal equinox are 0 degrees right ascension and 0 degrees declination. Today that point is in Pisces. The word equi stands for equal and nox means night. At the time of the equinox, shadow hours and days are of equal lengths. There is a second point of equinox in the celestial sphere. The position is 12 o'clock hours RA, 0 degrees declination. Its point time marks the beginning of fall in the northern hemisphere. Shadow hours and day are once again of equal lengths. When the Sun crosses the celestial equator in its southward journey in the constellation Virgo, a constellation in the region of the celestial equator between Leo and Libra, also called Virgin. The gravitational pull of the Sun and the Moon on the Earth creates a very gentle wobble in the north-south tilt of the Earth. It affects the direction in which your polar axis is pointed and the angle of the celestial equator in relation to the path of the Sun and the Ulhi zodiac. The effect is called precession. It has been compared to the wobble which can be observed in spinning tops. For the Earth, each jiggle takes 26,000 years to complete. Recession very gradually changes the apparent positions of the stars in relation to us. In the course of precession, about 255 BC, the vernal birthplace passed into the sign of the fish, and the Messiah has been represented for 2,155 years by the ram or the lamb. The original fishman called Oan or Onas in Chaldea dates back from the previous cycle of precession, or 26,000 years earlier, and about 255 BC the Messiah, as the fishman, was to come up once more as the manifester from the celestial waters. The coming Messiah is called Dag the fish in the Talmud, which is the collection of ancient rabbinical writings consisting of the Mishnah and the Gemara, consisting of the basis of religious authority in the Orthodox Judaism, and he is tied into the sign of the fish, the sign of Sima, Pisces. In the scroll of Johanna John, the 14th degree in the second verse, when Yeshua says, "In my Father's house there are many mansions or abodes," this is referring to the 12 houses of the zodiac, which are symbolic of the different star constellations. In the book of Matthew, called by the Christians Matthew, the 14th degree, the 17th verse, Yeshua fed his followers 2 fishes, which is the sign of Pisces, the 2 fishes. Yeshua is referred to as the fisherman. That is why the popes wear the mithra or headdress. It is symbolic of the deity Dogon, because Rome ruled the world for 2,000 years under the age of Pisces. The next 2,000 years goes into the age of Aquarius, which symbolizes the water bearer, a man with water pitchers. If you read the 22nd degree, the 10th verse of the book of Luke, where Yeshua says, "Behold, when ye are entered into the city, there shall be a man to meet you, bearing a pitcher of water. Follow him into the house where he entereth in." When Yeshua appeared to his disciples in the book of Matthew, the 28th degree and the 20th verse, where he says, "And teach them to obey everything I have commanded you, and I will be with you always to the end of the age." He is talking about leaving the end of the Piscean era and moving on to the Aquarian age. The first point, Kumal, Aries, used to be the point of the spring equinox when early records were kept some 2,000 years ago. Since then, it has moved into Sima, Pisces, and about 600 years from now, it will drift into Gu, Aquarius. Now, we are heading into a new era, which is a period of time as reckoned from a specific date, serving as the basis of its chronological system. We have moved from the era of water, the Piscean era, to the era of air, which utilizes laser beams, video, fiber optics, etc. The Aquarian age is composed of religion that deals with the lesser mysteries, which are symbolized with water. The lesser mysteries are those esoteric teachings that have become religions. These religions started with a spiritual nature. The masters came with spiritual doctrines, and as time passed, the doctrines lessened and lessened until we became purely physical. That's why they are called the lesser mysteries. With the era of air beings comes a new awareness. You are beginning to realize that there is more to man than just his senses, that you have connections with beings outside your dimension.